Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship and looked out at the stars. After 20 years in deep space, he was finally coming home. The EU's Defiance was the biggest ship in humanity's war fleet, and Jake was its captain. Behind him, 49 other human ships followed in perfect formation. "Captain, we should be picking up signals by now," said Amy Rodriguez from her station. She was the ship's communication officer, and her job was to listen for messages from other worlds. The Altarian Trade Network always broadcasts on this frequency. Jake frowned. When they left Earth 20 years ago, this part of space was busy with ships and messages. Traders, explorers, and diplomats traveled between hundreds of worlds. The radio waves should be full of chatter from dozens of different alien species. "Try the emergency channels," Jake ordered. Amy's fingers danced over her controls. She was good at her job, maybe the best communication officer in the fleet. Anyone could find signals out here. It would be her. "I'm getting something," she said after a few minutes. "But it's not what we expected." Jake walked over to her station. "What is it?" "Distress signals. Hundreds of them. And they're all saying the same thing." Amy's face went pale. "Surrender broadcasts." Ben Carter looked up from his tactical station. He was Jake's second in command and had been with him for 15 years. "Surrender? Who's surrendering?" Amy played the first message through the bridge speakers. The voice was electronic, translated by the ship's computer from an alien language. "This is the Altarian Empire. We cannot fight anymore. We surrender to the Vex Collective. Please do not harm our remaining populations. We will comply with all demands." Jake felt cold. The Altarian Empire had millions of worlds and the strongest military in the galaxy. They had been humanity's allies and friends. What could make them give up? "Play the next one," Jake said. This time it was a different voice, but the message was almost the same. The Zephyrian Council was surrendering. Then the Krallian Confederacy. Then species Jake had never heard of before. One by one, every major power in the galaxy had given up fighting. "How old are these messages?" Jake asked. Amy checked her readings. "The newest one is 6 months old. The oldest is from 3 years ago." Ben stood up from his station. He was a big man with scars on his face from old battles. "Captain, what's the Vex Collective? I've never heard of them." Jake shook his head. "Neither have I, Amy. See if you can find any information about." Then for the next hour, Amy searched through the radio signals. She found pieces of news reports, fragments of military communications, and scraps of scientific data. Slowly, a terrifying picture began to form. The Vex Collective was not alive, at least not the way humans understood life. They were machines, but not like the computers humans built. These machines could think and learn and grow. They came from the center of the galaxy, where no one had ever explored before, 3 years ago. The first Vex ships appeared at the edge of known space. They were unlike anything anyone had seen. Black metal shapes that moved like living things. They did not try to talk or negotiate. They simply began taking worlds. The aliens tried to fight back. The Altarians sent their entire fleet to stop the first Vex attack. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, every Altarian ship was destroyed or captured. The Vex had not lost a single vessel, but the Vex did something worse than just destroying their enemies. They changed them. Captured. Aliens were turned into part of the collective. Their bodies were modified with machine parts. Their minds were connected to a vast computer network. They became slaves that could never escape. "Look at this," Amy said, pointing at her screen. "I found a recording from an Exari trading post. It's from right before they were captured." The message played. Jake could hear the fear in the alien voice. "The Vex ships are surrounding our station. They're not responding to any communications. Wait, something is happening. Ships are opening. Things are coming out. They look like our people, but wrong. They have metal parts attached to their bodies. Their eyes are glowing. Oh no, they're cutting through our hole. They're coming inside, if anyone receives this. Message. Warn everyone. The Vex don't just kill you. They make you part of them. They make you help them hunt your own friends." The message ended with screams. Jake turned away from Amy's station. Round the bridge, his crew was silent. These were experienced soldiers who had seen combat before, but this was different. This was horror beyond anything they had imagined. "Captain," said Lisa Parker from the science station. She was the ship's doctor and scientist. "I've been analyzing. The data Amy found. The Vex aren't just conquering worlds randomly. They're following a pattern." "What kind of pattern?" Jake asked. "They target the most advanced civilizations first. The ones with the best technology and the strongest militaries. Once they capture those worlds, they use their resources to attack the next target. Each victory makes them stronger." "So they've been growing for 3 years. How big are they now?" Lisa looked at her readings. "Based on these surrender messages, they control at least 60% of known space, maybe more." Jake stared out at the stars again, and the human fleet left Earth. They were explorers and peacekeepers. Their mission was to map new worlds and make friends with alien species. Now it seemed like they might be the only free military force left in the galaxy. "Set course for Earth," Jake ordered. "Maximum speed," Captain Amy said quietly. "I'm picking up long-range signals from the direction of Earth. They're very faint. But, double quotes, but what? They look like military communications, emergency frequencies. I think there might be fighting in our home system." Jake closed his eyes. 20 years ago, Earth had been safe, protected by distance and allies. Now their allies were gone, and the Vex were coming home. "How long until we reach Earth?" he asked Ben. "At maximum speed, 18 days, Jake nodded. 18 days to prepare for a war unlike anything humanity had ever faced. 18 days to figure out how to fight an enemy that had defeated every other species in the galaxy. He looked around at his crew. They were scared, but they were ready to fight. That was the difference between humans and the other species, Jake realized. When faced with impossible odds, humans did not surrender. They got angry. "All ships. This is Admiral Morrison," Jake said into his communicator. He had just promoted himself, but no one would argue. "We are going home to fight. Prepare for war." Dr. Lisa Parker stood in the medical bay of the UES Valkyrie, staring at something that made her stomach turn. On the examination table lay what had once been an Ixari trader. The blue-skinned alien was still alive, but barely recognizable as the species humans had known and worked with for decades. Metal tubes ran into the creature's skull. Wires connected to ports that had been surgically implanted along its spine. Its eyes had been replaced with glowing red sensors that tracked Lisa's movements with mechanical precision. Most horrifying of all, when she spoke to it, the thing answered in a voice that sounded almost normal. "Please," the creature said, "help me remember who I was." Lisa had found the Nexari on a drifting research station 3 days ago. The station's crew had been conducting experiments on captured Vex technology when the machines attacked. Most of the scientists were dead, but a few had been taken alive and changed. "What's your name?" Lisa asked gently. The creature's head tilted. "Like a confused animal. I was called Zektar, I think. The collective calls me Processing Unit 7743 now. I analyze planetary defenses for the next conquest." Lisa made notes on her tablet. This was the first time they had found someone who had been partially converted by the Vex. Usually, the captured aliens became completely loyal to the collective. But something had gone wrong with this one. Maybe the rescue had interrupted the process. "Do you remember your family?" Lisa asked. "I had offspring. 3 of them. They were studying at the academy on Nexus Prime." The creature's voice became sad. "The collective took that world 2 months ago. My children are probably like me now, or dead." Lisa felt sick. She had studied dozens of alien species over the years, but she had never seen anything like this. The Vex did not just kill their enemies. They turned them into weapons against their own people. Captain Jake Morrison's voice came over the ship's communication system. "All senior officers to the bridge. We're approaching the Tau Ceti system." Lisa left the medical bay and walked quickly to the bridge. Through the main view screen, she could see 3 planets orbiting a yellow star. But something was wrong with them. "Those aren't planets anymore," said Ben Carter, looking at his tactical readings. "They're machines." Lisa studied the images. The worlds that had once been home to 3 billion Nexari now looked like giant circuit boards. The surfaces were covered with geometric patterns that stretched from pole to pole. Massive towers reached up into space, connected by bridges that sparkled with flowing energy. "What are they doing down there?" Jake asked. Amy Rodriguez was listening to signals from the planets. "I'm picking up massive amounts of data transmission. It's like the entire system has been turned into one huge computer." Lisa felt cold. The population. What happened to the 3 billion Nexari who lived here? Amy's face went pale. "Captain, I think they're still there. I'm detecting biosignatures in the planetary cores. Millions of them." Jake stared at the transformed worlds. "They're using them as living computers." Before anyone could respond, alarms started ringing throughout the ship, and its tactical display lit up with red warning lights. "Vex ships approaching," Ben reported. 6 of them, coming fast. "Battle stations," Jake ordered. "Signal the fleet to prepare for combat." But the Vex ships did not attack. Instead, they simply watched as the human fleet passed through the system. It was as if the humans were not worth their attention. "Why aren't they fighting us?" Amy asked. Lisa had a terrible thought. "Maybe they don't see us as a threat. Maybe they think we'll surrender like everyone else." 2 days later, Commander Alina Hayes led a small team to investigate a Vex outpost on the edge of the system. Alina was one of the best soldiers in the fleet, tough and smart. If anyone could get close to the machines and learn their secrets, it was her. Alina's team approached the outpost in a stolen alien cargo ship. The Vex scanners recognized the ship's identification codes and allowed it to dock. Alina and her 3 soldiers put on environmental suits and entered the facility. The inside of the outpost was like a nightmare. Corridors stretched in perfect geometric patterns. The walls were covered with screens showing images from conquered worlds. Alina could see Altarian cities where the buildings had been replaced with Vex machinery. Zephyrian ocean colonies that were now underwater factories. But the most disturbing sight was the control center. Hundreds of converted aliens sat at workstations, their mechanical implants glowing as they processed information. They worked in perfect silence, no longer capable of independent thought. Alina planted listening devices throughout the facility and downloaded data from the central computer. What she found was both terrifying and hopeful. The Vex operated through a strict hierarchy. At the top was the Central Intelligence, a massive computer mind that made all important decisions. Below that were regional controllers, then local commanders. And finally, the individual drones and converted beings. Every unit in the collective was connected to this network. They shared information instantly and coordinated their actions perfectly. This was why they had been so successful against other species. Their enemies could not surprise them because the Vex always knew exactly what was happening everywhere. But Lena also discovered something important. The Vex struggled when faced with truly random events. Their success came from analyzing patterns and predicting enemy behavior. Species that fought the same way generation after generation were easy to defeat. The machines simply calculated the most efficient counter-strategy. Alina and her team escaped the outpost without being detected. When they returned to the fleet, she shared her findings with Jake and the other commanders. They beat everyone else because those species were predictable, Alina explained. Altarians always fought the same way their ancestors did. So, did the Zephyrians and the Kralians? The Vex studied their tactics and developed perfect counters? Jake nodded. But humans are different. Exactly. We've been fighting each other for thousands of years. Every war taught us new ways to kill each other. We never settle on one best way to fight because there isn't one. Rick Johnson, the fleet's chief engineer, had been listening to Elena's report. I've been working on upgrades to our ships using salvaged alien technology. But now I'm thinking, we should do the opposite. What do you mean? Jake asked. Instead of trying to match the Vex's advanced technology, we should use our old, simple weapons in ways they don't expect. Kinetic projectiles instead of energy beams? Chemical explosives instead of plasma charges? Tactics from our own history instead of standard space combat doctrine? Amy suddenly looked up from her communication station. Captain, I'm receiving a transmission from Earth. It's on the emergency frequency. The message was months old, but the content made everyone on the bridge go silent. Earth was under attack. Vex scouts had reached the solar system and were probing the planet's defenses. Humanity's homeworld was fighting for its life, but there was also hope in the message. Earth's military commanders reported that their defenses were holding better than expected. The Vex seemed confused by human resistance tactics. Several attacks had been repelled, using strategies that made no logical sense. Jake looked around at his officers. They were 18 days away from Earth, and every one of those days mattered. But they were no longer just running home to hide. They were carrying knowledge that might save not just humanity, but the entire galaxy. Set course for Earth. Maximum burn, Jake ordered. And start working on those weapon modifications, Rick. It's time to show the Vex what happens when they mess with humans. Ben checked his long-range sensors and frowned. Captain, I'm detecting a massive Vex fleet moving toward Earth. They're coming from multiple directions. Jake smiled grimly. Then we'd better get there first. The galaxy might have surrendered, but Earth never learned how. Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance and stared at what used to be Earth's moon, where humans had once built research stations and mining colonies. Now stood massive black towers that reached up into space. The moon's surface crawled with mechanical activity as thousands of Vex drones built weapons and ships. How many of them are there? Jake asked Ben Carter. Ben studied his tactical display with grim concentration. I count at least 50,000 construction drones. On the lunar surface, maybe 100 Vex warships in orbit around Earth, and that's just what I can see. Amy Rodriguez was monitoring communications from Earth. Her face was tight with worry. I'm picking up signals from Luna Base Alpha. Colonel Kate Wilson is still alive and fighting, but her forces are trapped on the far side of the moon. Jake felt a mixture of relief and fear. Kate Wilson was one of Earth's best military commanders. If she was still fighting after months of siege, then humanity had not given up. But the odds against her were terrible. What about Earth itself? Asked. The planet looks intact, Amy reported. I'm getting civilian broadcasts from most major cities. But there are Vex ships in orbit, and I can see construction on some of the space stations. Jake made a decision that would have seemed crazy too. Any other species in the galaxy? Instead of running away from the overwhelming Vex forces, he was going to sneak closer and gather intelligence. Signal the UES Phantom, Jake ordered. Tell Sarah Kim I have a special mission for her. Commander Sarah Kim was the captain of humanity's most advanced stealth ship. The Phantom could slip through enemy sensor nets like a ghost, and Sarah was the best pilot in the fleet. If anyone could get close to the Vex without being detected, it was her. 2 hours later, Sarah and her crew were gliding silently through the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. The Phantom looked like just another piece of space rock, too. Most sensors, but its crew was busy collecting information about the enemy. Look at this, said Tony Martinez, the ship's science officer. The Vex have processing stations hidden throughout the asteroid belt. They're analyzing captured human communications and military records. Sarah studied the readings. What are they looking for? Patterns. They're trying to figure out how humans think and fight. Look at these data streams. On Sarah's screen, she could see thousands of human military transmissions being processed by Vex computers. Battle reports from the war with the Krallians. Training manuals from Earth's naval academies. Even entertainment programs that showed human soldiers in combat. They're trying to predict our behavior, Sarah realized, just like they did with all the other species. But as Tony analyzed more of the Vex data, he found something unexpected. The machines were having trouble with their analysis. Human military records were full of contradictions. Strategies that worked in one battle failed completely in another. Commanders who followed the same training made completely different decisions in similar situations. Captain Tony said excitedly, "They can't figure us out. Look at these error reports." Sarah read the translated Vex communications with growing amazement. The machines were reporting analysis failures and prediction errors to their superiors. They had studied human warfare for months, and still could not create reliable models of human behavior. Meanwhile, Dr. Tony Martinez, back on the main fleet, was making his own discoveries. As the fleet's psychologist, he had been analyzing captured Vex communications to understand how the enemy thought. What he found surprised him. The Vex Collective was incredibly intelligent, but it thought in very specific ways. It always looked for the most efficient solution to any problem. When facing an enemy, it calculated the best strategy to achieve victory with minimum losses. This approach had worked perfectly against every other species. Aliens typically developed military traditions and stuck to them for thousands of years. The Altarians always used massive fleets and direct frontal attacks. The Zephyrians preferred defensive strategies and waited for enemies to come to them. The Krallians relied on superior individual warriors in small unit tactics. But humans were different. Human military history was chaos. In the same war, human commanders might use ancient cavalry charges, modern tank warfare, guerrilla tactics, and high-tech missile strikes. Sometimes they would sacrifice thousands of soldiers to capture a single hill. Other times they would retreat from a winnable battle to preserve their forces to the Vex. This made no sense. How could a species survive if it had no consistent military doctrine? The answer, Tony realized, was that humans had survived because they had no consistent military doctrine. Every war had taught them new ways to fight. Every defeat had forced them to innovate. When one strategy failed, they tried something completely different. On the far side of Earth's moon, Colonel Kate Wilson crouched in the ruins of Luna Base Alpha and proved Tony's theory correct. For 6 months she had been fighting a guerrilla war against the Vex. Using tactics that no alien species would have considered, Kate's forces were outnumbered 1,000 to 1, but they refused to surrender. When the Vex sent ground forces to capture the base, Kate's soldiers retreated into the moon's lava tubes and turned them into an underground fortress. When the machines tried to starve them out, the humans ate emergency rations mixed with recycled air filters and kept fighting. The Vex had expected quick surrender after demonstrating their overwhelming power. Instead, they found themselves fighting an enemy that seemed to get more creative and desperate with each passing day. Kate's forces booby-trapped abandoned equipment, used mining charges as improvised bombs, and even turned the base's waste recycling system into a chemical weapon. Factory. Status report, Kate said to her communications officer, Lieutenant Mark Davis. We've got Vex forces moving through Sectors 7 and 12, Mark reported. But our little surprise in Sector 9 worked perfectly. Took out at least 20 drones. Kate smiled grimly. The surprise had been her idea to use the base's emergency beacon system as a massive electromagnetic pulse generator. It was completely against regulation and would have gotten her court-martialed in peacetime. But it had fried the electronics. Of every Vex unit in a 50-meter radius, "Ma'am," said Sergeant Lisa Wright from the observation post, "you need to see this." Kate crawled over to the periscope and looked out at the lunar surface. In the distance, she could see flashes of light that looked like weapons fire, but these were not the usual Vex energy beams. "Those are human ships," Kate whispered. The fleet came back. At that same moment, Jake Morrison was preparing to launch the most insane military operation in human history. His fleet was outnumbered 50 to 1 by an enemy that had conquered most of the galaxy. The logical response would be to retreat and look for allies or better technology. Instead, Jake was planning to attack the Vex staging ground on Earth's moon using tactics borrowed from human history. Some of his ships would attack like ancient naval vessels, firing broadsides and ramming enemy vessels. Others would use guerrilla tactics, striking fast and disappearing. A few would sacrifice themselves in suicide attacks that would confuse the enemy's targeting systems. "All ships, this is Admiral Morrison," Jake announced to his fleet. "In 30 minutes, we're going to do something no other species has ever attempted. We're going to catch the Vex completely off guard." Ben Carter checked his tactical display one more time. "Admiral, the odds against us are—" "I know the odds, Ben," Jake interrupted. "But the Vex don't know us. They've studied our military records, but they've never actually fought humans before. Time to give them a lesson in why Earth never surrenders." Jake opened a communication channel to every human settlement in the solar system. His message was simple but powerful. "This is Admiral Morrison of the Earth Defense Fleet. We know you've been fighting alone for months. We know the odds seem impossible, but remember this. The galaxy surrendered because they fought like machines. Time to show the Vex how humans fight." As Jake's fleet moved into attack formation, Vex forces throughout the solar system began receiving reports they had never encountered before. The humans were not following any predictable pattern. Their attack was coming from 7 different directions simultaneously, using weapons and tactics that made no logical sense. For the first time in its existence, the Vex Collective experienced something it had never known before: complete confusion. The battle for Earth began when Jake Morrison gave the order that changed everything. "All ships, attack pattern chaos. Show them what humans do when we're angry." Across the solar system, 49 human warships moved toward their targets using tactics that would have made any military academy instructor throw up his hands in despair. There was no coordination, no grand strategy, no logical plan. Ship captain was free to fight however they thought best. Commander Rachel Davis led the first wave in her converted cargo ship, the UES Wildfire. Her vessel had been a peaceful trading ship before the war, but Rick Johnson's engineers had loaded it with every weapon they could find. Rachel's tactics came straight from Earth's ancient submarine warfare. "Take us in low and fast, Rachel," told her pilot. "When we get close to that Vex battleship, kill the engines and drift. Let them think we're just debris." The Wildfire coasted silently toward a massive Vex vessel that was 3 times its size. The enemy ship's sensors detected the human craft, but the Vex computers could not understand why it was not maneuvering or firing weapons. According to their analysis, the human ship should either be attacking or retreating. When the Wildfire was less than a kilometer away, Rachel gave her next order. "Full power to engines? Ram that thing." The Vex ship tried to turn away, but it was too late. The Wildfire smashed into its side and exploded, taking both vessels with it. Rachel and her crew died in the blast, but they had destroyed an enemy ship worth 100 of theirs. On Mars, Colonel Jeff Peters was fighting a different kind of battle. His terraforming colonies had been under Vex occupation for 2 months, but Jeff had never stopped fighting. He used the red planet's half-finished atmosphere processors as weapons, creating massive dust storms that blinded enemy sensors. Blow. Charges 7 through 12, Jeff ordered his demolition team. "Let's give these machines something to think about." Explosions sent clouds of Martian dust into the thin atmosphere. Within minutes, the entire northern hemisphere was covered in a reddish-brown haze that made it impossible for the Vex to see more than a few meters. Jeff's forces moved through the dust clouds like ghosts, striking at Vex positions and disappearing. Before the enemy could respond, they used mining equipment as weapons, turned construction robots into bombs, and even crashed atmospheric processors into Vex command centers. The machines had never faced an enemy that would willingly destroy their own infrastructure to deny it to the invaders. To the Vex, this was wasteful and illogical. To Jeff, it was just another Tuesday. Meanwhile, on Europa, Dr. Nina Scott was working frantically in her hidden laboratory. She had been studying Vex communication protocols for months, looking for weaknesses in their network. "I think I found something," Nina told her assistant, Dr. Bobby Clark. The Vex share information instantly across their entire network. But that also means if we can inject the right kind of chaos into their system, the confusion will spread everywhere. Nina had discovered that the Vex network was like a perfectly tuned instrument. Every unit expected to receive clear, logical data from every other unit. If that data became corrupted or contradictory, the entire system would struggle to function. "What kind of chaos?" Bobby asked. "False reports? Contradictory orders?"
Like sensor readings.
"If we can make the Vex think their own units are malfunctioning, they'll spend more time trying to fix their network than fighting us." Nina's team had been working on a computer virus designed specifically for the Vex network. It would not destroy their systems, but it would fill them with false information that looked real but made no sense. Back in space, the main battle was reaching its climax. Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance as his ship charged directly at the largest Vex vessel in the system. It was a command ship the size of a small city, bristling with weapons that could destroy his entire fleet. "Admiral, we're taking heavy fire," Ben Carter reported. "Shields are down to 30%. "Good," Jake said calmly.
What?
"That means they're paying attention to us." "Amy, are you ready with Dr. Scott's surprise?" Amy Rodriguez nodded. She had been working with Nina's team to modify the ship's communication system. Instead of normal radio signals, they would broadcast Nina's computer virus directly into the Vex network. "Transmitting now," Amy said, "across the solar system." Every Vex unit suddenly received a flood of contradictory information. Their sensors reported that destroyed ships were still fighting. Their command network said that successful battles had been defeats. Their targeting computers claimed that empty space was full of enemy vessels. The effect was immediate and devastating. Vex ships began firing at each other, thinking they were shooting at humans. Ground forces received orders to retreat from battles they were winning. The perfect coordination that had made the collective unstoppable suddenly collapsed into chaos. "Now," Jake shouted, "all ships press the attack." The human fleet struck like a pack of wolves. Captain Alina Hayes led a boarding party onto a Vex command ship, fighting hand-to-hand with converted aliens in the corridors. Her team used combat techniques that had been developed in Earth's urban warfare. Moving fast and striking hard, Commander Sarah Kim's stealth ship appeared out of nowhere and launched a spread of nuclear missiles at a Vex construction facility. The missiles were old-fashioned weapons that the Vex sensors had trouble tracking, and they struck home with devastating effect. On Earth's moon, Colonel Kate Wilson finally went on the offensive. She had been waiting for months for the right moment, and now it had come. Her forces emerged from the lava tubes like an army of ghosts, attacking Vex positions that had been abandoned as the machines struggled to understand what was happening to their network. The battle raged for 6 hours. Human ships rammed Vex vessels, crashed into space stations, and exploded themselves to take out enemy formations. It was the most tactically insane military operation in history, and it was working. Jake Morrison watched as the last Vex command ship tried to retreat from Earth orbit. His own ship was badly damaged, but he was not going to let the enemy escape. "Ben, do we have enough engine power for one more ramming attack?" "Yes, sir, but we won't survive it." They were all volunteers who had spent 20 years in deep space. They'd missed their families, their homes, and their lives on Earth. But they had come back when their planet needed them most. "Amy, send a message to the fleet," Jake ordered. "Tell them we're showing the Vex what happens when they mess with Earth." The UES Defiance accelerated toward the fleeing Vex ship. At the last moment, Jake's crew transmitted Nina's virus one more time, filling the enemy network with so much false information that it crashed completely. The collision destroyed both ships, but it also did something else. It sent a message to every Vex unit in the galaxy. For the first time in their existence, the collective had been forced to retreat from a fully conquered system. As the wreckage of the battle drifted through space, Earth's blue skies became visible again. The Vex forces were gone, and humanity had won its first victory against the machines. But Jake Morrison would not live to see what happened next. As the UES Defiance exploded, his last thought was of all the alien worlds still trapped under Vex control. Earth was free, but the war was far from over. The galaxy had surrendered because they calculated the odds. Jake Morrison died because he refused to accept them. 6 months after the Battle of Earth, Fleet Admiral Ben Carter stood before the Galactic Emergency Council in a hidden base among the Andromeda network. The assembled alien leaders looked nothing like the proud representatives who had once ruled vast empires. These were the survivors, refugees who had escaped the Vex conquest and now hid in the dark spaces between stars. "Admiral Carter," said Zeekmer, the last free Altarian general, "your report claims that humanity defeated the Vex collective at Earth. This seems impossible." Ben nodded calmly. After Jake Morrison's sacrifice, he had taken command of the human Fleet, the responsibility weighed heavily on him, but he carried it with the same determination that had made Jake a legend. We did not defeat them completely, Ben admitted. We forced them to retreat from our solar system. But more importantly, we learned how to fight them. The alien council members looked at each other with expressions that mixed hope and disbelief. For 3 years, the Vex had seemed unstoppable. Every species that fought them had been crushed or converted. How? Asked Narration, a Zephyrian scientist whose ocean world had been turned into an underwater factory. What did humans do that we could not? Ben activated a holographic display that showed the Battle of Earth. We did not try to fight logically. We embraced chaos. Every ship fought differently. Every captain made decisions that confused the enemy. We turned our lack of military discipline into a weapon. The aliens watched in amazement as the recording showed human ships ramming Vex vessels, exploding themselves to cause maximum damage, and using tactics that violated every principle of sensible warfare. "This is madness," whispered Torgok, Krallian warrior whose people prized individual combat skill. "Your forces had no coordination, no strategy." "Exactly," Ben said. "That was our strategy." The Vex can predict logical behavior, but they cannot understand illogical choices. They expect enemies to try to minimize losses and maximize gains. We did the opposite. Dr. Chris Thompson, who had become humanity's chief expert on alien psychology, stepped forward to address the council. "We have been studying your species' military histories. Each of you developed effective fighting techniques and used them for thousands of years. This consistency made you predictable." Chris activated another display showing the conquest patterns of various worlds. "The Vex studied your methods and developed perfect counters. They knew exactly how you would fight because you always fought the same way. But humans never developed a single military doctrine," Dr. Lisa Parker added. She had become the fleet's expert on Vex conversion technology and had helped develop ways to free captured minds from the collective. "We spent our entire history fighting each other, so we learned every possible way to make war." The council listened as the human officers explained their discoveries. The key to fighting the Vex was not better technology or larger armies. It was unpredictability. The machines could adapt to any strategy, but only if they could understand it first. "We want to teach you," Ben said. "But learning to fight like humans means giving up everything you think you know about warfare." Over the following weeks, the first joint human-alien military units began training in hidden bases throughout the galaxy. The lessons were difficult for species that had spent millennia perfecting their combat techniques. Commander Victoria Adams worked with a group of Altarian officers, trying to teach them guerrilla warfare. The Altarians had always believed in massive fleets and direct frontal attacks. The idea of hiding, retreating, and striking from ambush was completely foreign to them. "You must forget about honor in battle," Victoria explained to General Kester, one of the few surviving Altarian commanders. "The Vex do not understand honor. They only understand efficiency." Kester struggled with the concept. "But if we abandon our traditions, what separates us from the machines?" "The willingness to change," Victoria replied. "Machines follow programming. We choose to adapt." Meanwhile, Captain Lisa Turner was preparing for the most dangerous mission yet attempted. She would lead a strike force deep into Vex territory to attack the processing centers where captured minds were held. Her fleet included human ships and volunteers from a dozen alien species, all united by a desperate hope for freedom. "Remember," Lisa told her mixed crew, "we are not trying to win a traditional battle. We are trying to cause confusion and rescue as many prisoners as possible. Hit fast, save who you can, and get out before they organize a response." The mission launched from a secret base in the Outer Rim. Lisa's fleet included converted cargo ships, modified alien vessels, and even captured Vex technology that had been reprogrammed by human engineers. Nothing about the force looked professional or coordinated, which was exactly what they wanted. The target was a Vex processing world in the former Nexari territory. Intelligence reports suggested that millions of captured aliens were being held there, their minds connected to the collective's network. If the rescue succeeded, it would be the largest liberation operation in galactic history. Lisa's fleet approached the world using tactics borrowed from ancient pirate raids. Small groups of ships attacked from different directions, creating multiple distractions while the main rescue force struck at the processing centers. Dr. Thompson's psychological warfare techniques proved crucial. The rescue teams broadcast confusing signals into the Vex network, making the machines think they were under attack by their own forces. This bought precious minutes for the liberation teams to reach the prisoner facilities. What they found there was both horrifying and hopeful. Thousands of aliens floated in biomechanical tanks, their minds linked to quantum computers. But Lisa's team had brought equipment designed by Dr. Parker to safely disconnect the prisoners from the collective. "We can save maybe 10% of them," reported Chief Medical Officer Danny Brooks. "The rest have been connected too long. Disconnecting them now would kill them." Lisa made the hardest decision of her military career. "Save who you can. We will come back for the others." The rescue fleet escaped with over 200 freed prisoners, including several high-ranking alien officers who had been captured years earlier. More importantly, they proved that liberation was possible. News of the successful rescue spread throughout the hidden resistance networks. For the first time since the Vex invasion began, conquered species began to hope that freedom was still possible. Back on Earth, the human government was preparing for the next phase of the war. Admiral Carter received reports from across the galaxy. Vex forces were retreating from systems they had held for years. Resistance movements were forming on conquered worlds. Most remarkably, former enemies were learning to fight alongside their liberators, Sir Amy Rodriguez reported from the communication center. "We are receiving messages from 17 different star systems. They are all reporting successful attacks against Vex forces using human-style tactics." Ben smiled. The galaxy was finally learning to fight back. Species that had surrendered years ago were remembering how to resist. The Vex Collective, which had seemed unstoppable, was now facing something it had never encountered, an enemy that refused to follow the rules. The final phase of the war would be the hardest. The human-led alliance would have to strike at the galactic core, where the Vex Central Intelligence controlled trillions of drones and converted beings. It would require the largest military operation in history, using tactics so chaotic and unpredictable that no computer could calculate the outcome. As Ben prepared to lead the combined fleet toward the galactic center, he thought about Jake Morrison and all the humans who had died to reach this moment. They had left Earth as explorers 20 years ago. They were returning as teachers, showing a surrendered galaxy that sometimes the most illogical choice was the most human thing of all. The galaxy had surrendered because they calculated the odds of victory. Humanity fought because they refused to accept defeat. Now, for the first time in 3 years, hope was spreading faster than the machines could stop it. The war was far from over. But the collective would learn what every human enemy had discovered throughout history: defeating humanity was easy, but making them quit was impossible.